on reviewing The Invisible Doctrine, A Secret History of Neoliberalism. So yes, I was just talking about dark money in the previous video. Now neoliberals tend to reject the notion that neoliberalism is a distinct ideology that needs a name at all. Part of the effort to normalise and naturalise it is to persuade us it's just the way things are, as I've already said before. You know, by keeping it invisible, by not naming the ideology, by almost pretending it isn't an ideology, it's harder then to confront it. If it's just like the air we breathe, it's, you know, the atmosphere we're in, and it's just the way things are, then it's harder to challenge it. Because obviously if you name it, if you highlight the fact that it's an ideology, same as any other ideology, then you're exposing how it's basically a construct that is created by human beings, and therefore it can be torn apart and deconstructed and exposed for what it is, and an alternative system could come into being potentially. So that's very strategic, not naming it. Naming it is part of shining a light on it, and it's the first step, you could say, towards deconstructing it and getting rid of it. So oligarchs, often covertly, using dark money, fund think tanks and academic departments. These institutions make unreasonable demands. These institutions make the unreasonable demands. They make the unreasonable demands of oligarchs sound reasonable. And the press is also largely controlled by the oligarchy as well, and the voice of the oligarchs is then interpreted as the voice of the people. In 1938, President Franklin Roosevelt sent US Congress this warning. He said, "The liberty of a democracy is not safe if the people tolerate the growth of the private sector to a point where it becomes stronger than their democratic state itself. That, in its essence," he said, "is fascism." And that was what Franklin D. Roosevelt said in 1938. No one says that anymore. It just shows how far right things have become. No one will say that anymore. So yeah, the book also talks about the covert privatisation of the NHS, death by 1,000 cuts, he calls it. I like that, death by 1,000 cuts. I've been using that myself now. I think that's a good phrase. It's exactly what it is. In 2022, Liz Truss, who was very briefly Prime Minister in the UK, very briefly, co-authored a book called Britannia Unchained, and this transferred the blame for everything that had gone wrong in the UK to a so-called diminished work ethic, and it blamed inequality on laziness. The book provided a terrifying vision of a nation governed by raw economic power without effective social or environmental protection. Completely unhinged she is, that woman. She's Liz Truss, by the way, the same woman who also argued that people receiving cancer care should essentially be left to die in order to make savings as well. So absolutely awful. Now during the 1990s and early 2000s, the dominant force in neoliberal nations was corporate power. And this wanted technocratic government. It wanted managers who could deliver a stable state platform for business and secure profits against democratic change. But this has been mutating into oligarchic power. And this exposes one of the paradoxes of neoliberalism, which is while it fetishises competitive enterprise, in reality it empowers rentiers and asset strippers, which is the opposite of the creative entrepreneurs it celebrates. And yeah, so those who are poor today, regardless of their hard work or creative talents, are likely to remain poor. Oligarchs are people whose economic power translates into huge political power. For example, people like Robert Murdoch, Elon Musk, etc. And what oligarchs want is not what the old corporations wanted. They seek the deconstruction of the administrative state. Chaos is their profit multiplier. Every rupture, disaster, is used to seize more of the assets on which our lives depend. So, yeah, basically disaster capitalism. It's their sort of like lifeblood. So the book says there are two main forms of capitalist enterprise. The first type of capitalist enterprise consists of companies whose investments might not mature for several years. They rely on certainty, stability and continuity, and it seeks an accommodation with the administrative state. They benefit from regulations that exclude dirtier competitors. The second variety of capitalism is what Monbiot calls warlord capitalism. And this sees all restraints on wealth accumulation, taxes, regulations, public ownership of essential services as illegitimate. They basically want total freedom for themselves at everyone else's expense. This form overlaps more with oligarchic power than corporate power. Hayek expressed a preference for Pinochet's dictatorship over what he called a democratic government devoid of liberalism. Sounds very ironic, doesn't it? Like, how does liberalism sit within a dictatorship? But yeah, this Orwellian inversion of words, like all the words that we used to think we understood what they meant, words like freedom, liberty, they don't mean what we think anymore because they've been completely co-opted and distorted by the neoliberal agenda. It's very crafty. Like they've taken words that previously were used by like ordinary people as a way of, fighting for a genuine freedom, and these words have now been co-opted by the elite to mean a complete opposite. Now, Brexit in the UK, leaving the European Union, provided an opportunity for warlord capitalism. Insecurity was an opportunity. Insecurity is opportunity. Insecurity of everyone else, that is. So when they talk about insecurity, these capitalists are meaning insecurity for everyone else, but that's what these capitalists thrive on. Brexit's backers sought to tear down environmental, labour and human rights protections. There were concerns that Brexit would undermine the market advantages for businesses that play by the rules. Because without regulatory constraints, the warlords would wipe them out. So many of the old school corporate style capitalists were actually deeply worried by Brexit because they were worried because they knew that essentially the warlord type of capitalism would come in and, without the regulation, they'd be wiped out by these dirtier competitors that regulatory capitalism tries to keep in check. And the oligarchs who have shown great interest in Brexit tend to have very weak ties to Britain. For example, the campaign received significant assistance from the US billionaire Robert Mercer. A trick of modern politics is to disguise economic conflicts as cultural conflicts. For example, they made Brexit about limiting immigration and about state sovereignty, and this provided cover for economic warfare waged by disaster capitalists. And then the book also talks about the rise of the clowns. So that's people like Trump and Johnson who actually help oligarchs via distraction. So while the rich fleece us, we are persuaded to look elsewhere to channel our anger towards immigrants and Muslims, etc. The book also talks about conspiracy theories as well, the rise of conspiracy theories, another distraction. Now there are genuine conspiracies, for example, powerful people coming together hidden from public view with dark money, advancing their own interests. That is a genuine conspiracy. That's really happening. We should be concerned about that. A genuine conspiracy is basically how power operates. That is a conspiracy. Power operates via conspiracy. For example, when those who already possess power and wealth want more, they don't advertise their agenda. It's very hidden, it's very opaque. However, for distraction, the conspiracy theories that are used to distract people are not genuine conspiracies. They are what are called conspiracy fictions. But misleadingly called conspiracy theories because they're not genuine conspiracy theories. A genuine conspiracy theory would be how the rich hide their money and are covertly funding political campaigns and we don't know where the money's coming from. That's a genuine conspiracy. Conspiracy fictions, on the other hand, are just used to distract people from what's really going on. And they allege conspiracies for which there's no evidence. So there's no interest in genuine conspiracies, aside from creating a cover for them. To peddle conspiracy fictions and persuade others to believe them, though, is itself an assertion of power. The fictions also reassure. They tell people all is well, our fears are unfounded. For example, climate breakdown is a hoax. That's an example of a conspiracy fiction. Or COVID, there's nothing to worry about, an example of conspiracy fiction. Vaccination is a conspiracy fiction as well. The whole idea that, vaccination's a suspect, conspiracy fiction. So instead of huge structural forces that present existential threats, the purveyors of fictions tell the audience the real villains are those who actually wield very little power. For example, climate scientists, public health researchers, or even asylum seekers, Muslims or trans people. And it also tells us we don't have to do anything, so it actually robs us of our agency. But it does provide self-aggrandisement, reassurance, and freedom from civic responsibility. Conspiracy fictions also provide fuel for far-right politics, which thrive during periods of instability as well. So it talks a bit about the anti-vaccine movement as well, which has proven to be an effective channel for pumping far-right ideas into left-wing countercultures. Scepticism towards power and the purpose of Big Pharma is reasonable, but in some quarters this is morphed into a suspicion of all preventative medicine. So that's where you end up with a conspiracy fiction. It's not actually grounded on any evidence. Conspiracy fictions divert popular discontent towards scapegoats, and people who peddle conspiracy fictions are actually generating support for elite political projects.